The next talk is very different. So it's by Paulo de Assis from Orpheus Institute, and the title is Logic of Experimentation, Rethinking Music Performance Through Artistic Research.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I also want to congratulate you, Xavier, for this great initiative. And as the President said before, I mean, the fact that so many different takes and perspectives on music come together is unique and extraordinary. So my paper is this one. I decided to focus on the experimentation, this idea, of course, but the title of my ERC grant, the acronym was musicexperiment21.eu. And one thing I have to say before starting is that my institution, the Orpheus Institute, is an institute that works only in artistic research. So everybody that works in the institute is a researcher. This means we publish books and chapters and articles, but mandatorily we have to be practitioners. We have to be performers or composers. This means every day we have to be doing our artistic work. So this is mandatory for us. This is a specificity of our institute. So if you follow this link, musicexperiment21.eu, you will find our WordPress page, and you can find a lot of things. I will just very, very briefly show you some of those things. I just prepared, the site is loaded already, so we don't need to lose time. So this is the entry page, and you have our artistic projects, a selection of them. Every single project has many sub-projects inside, so if you then, after this talk, in the next months, if you click there, you'll find a lot of information for every single project. You find our publications. We published around 13 books, and I will show at the end some of them, some articles. We are still building the chapters. We have 30 chapters, so they will be added on. The conferences we organized and the archive, because my project is now finished. Since 5 months, we finished the project. So you have all the history of the project. Also, the blog function is now there in the archive. And maybe of interest for those still running a project is the reports. You can find our midterm reports. The final report next week will be there. You have already the draft version. And the financial reports, as soon as they are fully approved by Europe, the last one, then it will also be there. So it's a resource, I suppose, for everybody that has an ERC grant. And now coming back to, okay, can we, there, and there we go. Okay, so now it's the actual beginning of things. So this project was about this, rethinking performance of notated Western art music. So you see a lot of restrictions, what we dealt about, what we're talking about. What are the conditions and what we do when we do a performance of notated art music. The main results, which corresponded also to the main strands of research, were these two. One, we were aiming at inventing new modes of making performances. And the other is conceptually, to really come up with new ways of thinking musical entities, musical objects. What is musical artworks at the end of the day? And these two strands of research, of course, are intertwined. And this evening, in the concert you'll experience, you'll see and listen the kind of things we invented in terms of the performative aspect of the project, the first part. And for this talk today, I will obviously focus on the conceptual achievements of the project. Just to give you some images on the performative thing, and something that you will see later on this evening, very quickly, this is the main message we came up. Am I allowed to move? No, not allowed to move. Okay, that's freedom, questions of freedom, and of the law, the philosophy of law. So this is the easiest way to understand what we invented, is we understand performance not as a space of representation of something that you know before the performance. Everybody, the audience, the performer, everybody in hall or at home listening to a recording, but you see performance as a space for problematizing specific musical works. This is the short descriptor of everything we did. So it's focus on problematization on stage, not on books, not on chapters, on articles. This has been done for 200 years, very well done. we support, we do that too. But we think on stage is the perfect occasion to problematize things. For example, pictures of our performance of a project on the music of Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher. He was also a composer. So we were asked by the Tanzquartier in Vienna to do a performance on his music. Very difficult situation because the music of Nietzsche is clearly not very good music, not high-level music. So we have to discover a way to create a context where this makes perfectly sense. So you have, on stage, you have a pianist, in this case myself, you have a dancer, and you have a philosopher, which is also in our team working with us. And you already see from the pictures that this is not a regular concert, a traditional concert situation we create. So you have the dancer, myself. This is a lead situation, a song by Nietzsche, where we pre-record the singer, and I'm accompanying live on the piano there. Another series of performances we have on the Rasch. This is from Rasch 25, last November. Again, you have different actants on stage. You have video, you have texts being projected. You have many different kind of things. And from this evening, we will show you Rasch 27. And I will explain later on why these numberings, it's not never the same. So it's always a different recombination of things about a given work. So, in terms of the conceptual achievements of the project, I decided for today to present you these three, which I think are the most crucial ones. A new way of conceiving what we usually call musical works. We created a new research methodology, and we invented a new actant in music. I'll go through this now. What I mean with image of work, I mean very simply how all of us conceive in our brain, in our system, in our body, what specific work is. If I tell you Beethoven Fifth Symphony, what are you thinking? Bar 72, second movement, first movement, the opening, the end. Everybody is making his own construction of something right now. So how we conceive this? And the classical image, the classical paradigm, which is the concept by David Davis, supported by Lydia Ger's work concept notion, is based on this notion of the strong work concept, so very traditional thinking. You have the composer, usually a genius, who has an idea, and he notates it somehow into a work, and then you have the performer, and you have the listener. And you see immediately that the performer is in a position of reproducing something that exists before. So you have, on the one hand, you have scores and editions, where this music is preserved somehow, and on the other hand, you have concerts and recordings. And in the last 100 years at least, musicology or theories about music focus or on the scores editions, music as text, or on the concerts and the recordings, very much in the last 20 years on that corner. And the point is that we saw immediately that we need to rethink this work, and we have to first replace it by work strike through, because the moment you start thinking of how we construct this image of work, all of us, we think about background of that work, things that were in the world before, sketches, drafts, editions throughout time, different performing styles, listening expectations, criticality. All this makes that works are not totally stable entities, as normally Platonic views on music think. Works are very stable, petrified in stone, but they are not totally unstable, as deconstruction would like to have them. So we claim works are meta-stable constructions. They have some stable elements, some unstable elements, and they live in between. So we came to this is the first conceptual thing that we came up, is the image of work as assemblage. And I'm relying here, for those that know assemblage theory, something now very important in social sciences, and we apply this theory to music very strongly. I'll show you that in our book some chapters about this. To give you a very concrete idea, these are the kind of things when we think about any given musical work that we know exist in the world and are what constitute, what enable us to think of any musical work. I divide them in four main categories, which I call strata. And you have everything, all objects that exist in the world before a composer came to a first formulation of any given work. I call it substrata. What existed before were treatises, manuals, historical instruments, all those iconography, etc. exist in the world. So the images in these next four slides are related to Diabelli variations by Beethoven. So, for example, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach's treatise on how to play the keyboard existed in the world before Beethoven composed that piece. And Beethoven knew it, and the whole context knew it, so it certainly played some kind of role. It's part of the substrata. Next, you have everything that composer, he or she, generated in the process of coming to a first formulation of what we used to call musical work. So, sketches, drafts, first editions, composers' own writings about that piece. I call this parastrata. They are leading to something. From the moment something exists in a first, even vague formulation in the world, others start picking it up. Others start doing editions of those objects, of those sketches, of those last manuscripts, etc. You have period editions, like on the right corner. You have modern editions, very recent. You have books about the work, musicological books, in this case, Kinderman's essays on Diabelli. So all this I call epistrata. They start radiating from this center. They are infinite, never-ending. And finally, from all those objects, people, mostly artists, performers, doers, they do artistic realizations from those materials. I call them metastrata. And this is, with this fourth strata, I built a kind of proto-ontology of musical works that goes beyond Platonist or nominalistic views. For those that know a bit of this philosophy of music, they are very different, but in one point they agree that works precede the moment of the performance, and the performer has to reproduce something. Reproduction is, by the way, the word that Adorno used precisely for the act of performing music in front of someone else. So, once we have this kind of classification or the partition of things that exist in the world, and I insist in the materiality of these things, these are no idealist constructions. These objects exist in libraries, in archives, you can find them. You can come to a methodology specific for artistic research. This means archaeology, first moment, the archaeological moment. You go into the world, you go into these archives, into these libraries, you find all possible materials that relate to any given work that you want to problematize. Second, from that investigation, you extract genealogically most interesting bits, most interesting strata from there. And those are the ones you bring to your operating desk that you will work with on your table and do things with it. So you find connectors, genealogical relationships. And this can be work done by musicologists, by music theoreticians, the two first steps. But when it comes to the problematization, I think here the artistic activity is unescapable. So you start in the archaeological moment by identifying the innumerable things, the unstable particles in the world that belong to that work. Then you find the singularities, special, particular pieces of that you found in that travel in the world. And then experimentally, you start reassembling those objects in previously unseen connections. And these new arrangements, they can, of course, re-enter the archaeological moment for future generations of your own use. And this is precisely where our series of outputs comes in. Because as you can see here, through this circularity, I'm generating a system, a tripartite methodology that allows for these different rearrangements. So, in the Rasch X series, this means if today we do Rasch 27 this evening, this means there have been 26 instantiations of these materials before. Some of them are performances, or were performances, some were chapters, some were conferences about those materials. In this case, Rasch is about Schumann, a piece by Robert Schumann, Kreisleriana. And this is a methodology that creates also a working, how we work daily, on a daily basis, what we do. We do these kind of things. We rearrange these things, we think about them, we do the research, archaeological, genealogical, and then we artistically problematize things. So this evening you'll have Rasch 27. This is the postcard and program you'll have this evening on your seat waiting for you with what we are doing and the reference. It will be added today. Today we'll also make a live stream through the research catalog. Everything we are doing will be there. So from tomorrow you'll have a new entry here. So to conclude this section on the image of work, I just want to show you these 3 slides. This is, in my eyes, the traditional vision of musical work. It's an Euclidean image of work. The work is that strange object in the middle, is perfectly identifiable, perfectly measurable. Music theory, music analysis, they love this kind of vision because they can measure every single parameter of a given musical work. And it exists in a three-dimensional space, a superior space where we can look at it. This is the Euclidean image of things. It produces this kind of analytical things, and it doesn't matter if it is Schenker or Reti or digital musicology or whatever. They all aim at producing this kind of, to encapsulate, to reduce music to its extensive properties, what you can measure from the exterior. We oppose to this a Riemannian image of work, where what matters are the intrinsic properties, the energetic properties. So the moment you start dealing with the materials, you are in a performative mood and movement and research. And you are looking for every possible connector from every single point in a sketch, in an edition, in a critical reflection. Where from can you jump to a new level of energy? Not to measure things. We are not interested to know the measurements of an instrument or of a score. We are interested in the energetic potential for future realizations of music. And this obviously brings us to what the new actant in music. We like to call it the operator, which is a tribute to an Italian theater maker, Carmelo Bene, who saw himself as an operatore teatrale, not as a dramaturge or a choreographer. And this figure merges the traditional roles associated with composer, performer, scholar. So if anyone entered my team, my ERC grant, day one I ask them, can you perform? Which instrument? Can you compose? Show me, let's work. Can you produce scholarly research? Let's work on this. And we all did this for 5 years, and we continue now with the continuation of the project in my host institution. Not anymore these partitions. The composer is not a demiurge, is not a genius. We all can be composers. We all can be performers, and we all can be scholars. And if we have the tools, and if we understand this music work as assemblage, we can start operating in a much more creative and productive way than we do today in 99% of the concerts and musical life we see in the world. And of course, this makes us work transdisciplinary, very important. So you'll see in our conferences, we have conferences on relation to philosophy, particularly with Gilles Deleuze and Michel Foucault. We create very strong articulation between artistic research and those kind of philosophies. We are extra-disciplinary, we go out of music, and in some moments of research, we are anti-disciplinary. Because I think if musicians remain only inside of music, that's very poor for their spirits, for their activity, for their life at the end of the day. You have to go out of your discipline, see what others are doing, and then come back with a much better view and with unsuspected possibilities. I'm concluding now. So these are some of the outputs that are just appearing now, some already published. On top you have books. On the left is my own monograph, Logic of Experimentation. Will be out in 2 weeks, Leuven Press. You can already pre-order. There are links in our website. Powers of Divergence was a PhD thesis, fantastic, where the operator is very much discussed. The Dark Precursor is a double volume on our relations between philosophy and music. Transpositions, you have different musicians from all over Europe, how they transpose from one field of knowledge, scientific or technological, into music. And Virtual Works, Actual Things is a book on ontology with prominent authors. I was the editor there about music ontology and how this new image of work I am proposing can be integrated in the more conventional views. And below you have some artistic outputs, a CD published by Kairos in Vienna with the work Piece of Mine. You have Diabelli Machines, is a DVD and a CD with the project on the Diabelli Machines. We had 7 instantiations of that project. Then you have a CD on a piece by Luigi Nono, which was very crucial to our project, and a vinyl, an LP, where Juan Parra did a rearrangement of Bruno Maderna's works. And Juan Parra, Lucia, and myself will be the performers this evening, so you'll see what kind of things we do on stage. So please visit us at our website. You'll have a lot of information, and from there, you will discover, clicking by, you come to all our research catalog web pages, which are immense, many, 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 where you have for every project, for every performance, the video or the audio recording and a lot of information, a lot of schemes, etc. And that's it. I thank you for your attention.
Okay, we have time for a couple of questions. Maybe.
Yeah, thank you for a very, very interesting talk where performance is at the center. And so in looking at these meta-stable zones of music and the different strata there, I wonder what the leakages are between the strata, you know, if it's metastable. And then, if then there are leakages across these strata, whether in your methodology, you are looping back from the problematization to archaeology. But why not to the instantiations in the middle? So I wonder if there isn't some kind of more, instead of a single grand loop, which somehow seems to me going back to, as much as you're going radical, you're coming back to the work. So where are the little leakages, where are the little iterations that might make this alive?
This is a very pertinent question, and of course, for the sake of time and slides, I didn't show all these things. First, the leakage, there are many leakages. And there are two other kind of strata that I didn't put here, because in my book I talk about everything, but here, not possible. You have at least interstrata, which are in between, and I always have discussions. Now some people are starting to use this for their people that I didn't know, they are writing emails, how would I locate things in their particular cases? And more and more we discover there are many interstrata, things in between. You have also allostrata, you have objects that do not pertain to any given word, they do not really pertain, but for some reason throughout history they enter the picture, and you cannot explain them in traditional sense. This is one aspect, so leakages there are. And also, I want to insist, these strata, they should not be seen, now they look very stable in themselves. They are ontologically not really defined, because epistrata, metastrata, for example, the moment you produce a metastrata, you can say it becomes an epistrata immediately. Just finish the concept, that's an epistrata. Yeah? So they are functionally different. It depends on the use you are making of that object in a particular moment, how they are then ontologically defined. But they are not ontologically forever defined. And the second question I really like, because that was a beauty of the project, that we started with this system, and because I had first to convince my colleagues, musicologists, the music theoreticians, that I have a consistent operating system. But as soon as we started doing our things, as you just said, we are much more radical. We break the third line from the new arrangement to the archaeology, because if you really problematize a work, of course, you are destroying also the stratification. You are going again, you are fighting, you are fighting stratification, which is the classic, the old model, So indeed, it will be very important in this scheme to have another arrow going completely outside, which I think is the future. The next project we are having now is to radically go away from this. But so the answer is yes. For the sake of time, I couldn't put it here. But it's a crucial question indeed, because you can do everything I just said and be very traditional, come back simply and avoid going out. Our goal is to go more and more out, for sure.
Any other question?
Thank you. A very interesting model. That's exactly the slide I have question about, and I'm sure it's talked about in your book, which I will read eagerly. But you seem to experiment only in your problematization in that slide, and I wondered if there was not like back and forth, a bit like Atao was saying, like is there no back and forth between genealogy and archaeology as well, and experimentation, because that is quite a curated process to go from an amount of evidence to building a narrative. The genealogy is usually quite curated, let's put it like this. So how do you deal with that, that process?
Absolutely, it's another excellent question. These things, and again, in the scheme, maybe the arrows, that's the main movement if you want to produce something to put something new in the world artistically, you have to go in that way. But of course, between archaeology and the genealogy, I mean, how do you decide what is a singularity and what is not? We are talking about art, social sciences, so it can vary. I have an idea, you can have a different idea, so it depends very much. I always give an example in the Nono project. It's about a piano piece by Luigi Nono. There are 500 sheets of manuscript, sketches of Nono. And maybe 400 of them, they are all the same, there's nothing special there. 100 are very interesting, so everybody looks at that 100. But then luckily enough, I was the first to see one particular sketch in a corner of a sketch where I saw something that for me is the example of singularities, where Nono just writes down 12 pitches and says what he will do with these 12 pitches. And I went home, I sat down, and I started writing what he said. And after 1 hour, I had the first 3 bars of the score, more or less. It was not the final score. But so that's absolute singularity. I think everybody with the time to see that will discover that is the moment where the energy, the futurity of this sketch is implied and of all work. So that is a kind of universal singularity everybody would found. But there might be others. I don't know, if you're looking for an orchestral piece, you are an oboe player or a violin player, you might look quite differently. Or if you're a sociologist of music, you might not even look at sketches, you look at other things. So that's my point in the new image of work, that every person constructs a different image of work. So if I talk Beethoven Fifth Symphony, there are as many Fifth Symphonies as people in this hall right now. Because it depends what we have seen from that, what we have heard from that particular work, what we have read about that work. So it's very crucial, and I totally agree with you, it's a very creative process, this choice of materials. It's crucial, and we work this daily also with the PhD students. How do you discover this power or not power, more or less? And at a certain point, there is a subjectivity there. There is something that touched you more than me. And okay, go for it. What matters is then what you do on stage. That's why at the end of the day, I think the problematization is where you really make the difference or not. Because on the rest, you are at home. You are working at home. Yeah? But when you expose naked in front of everybody, you cannot hide anything. So that's the moment of, the facts arrive there. Yeah, but so I agree with you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's leave it here. So thank you very much for your talk again.